Hey everybody, it's me, your boy Doki. Thank you so much for tuning into this video. The question of the day for you is if you could have any animal as a pet, extinct or still alive, living in a zoo, living in an aquarium, you have unlimited funds to take care of this animal. What animal would you like to have as a pet? And I would like to take a second to tell you about my Patreon. If you guys click the link down below, you'll be taken to my Patreon page, and for $5, you could be like these wonderful people here. With your support, you keep the lights on, you keep the content coming out, and I appreciate every single one of you who has donated in the past and will donate in the future, and especially if you're right here on the screen. If you donate the $5, you will get content earlier than when it goes out on YouTube or on any other sites that I make content on. And you'll get your name shouted out right here on the screen. So yeah, if that is something you're interested in, maybe consider clicking the link. It is not required, but I appreciate it so much. I've kept you guys from this audio long enough, so please enjoy this one, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you. Bye.
Welcome, everyone, sinners, ghouls, vagabonds of alike. Welcome to Sleepless Nights, with your host, the Radio Demon. Me! Gather around your favorite listening device, turn that shit all the way up. Your favorite demon daddy is going to read you a bedtime story. We're gonna scour the hellscapes of the internet to find the most scary stories that you've ever heard. And by that I mean, I'm going into Reddit's Nosleep and finding the best one that I could find. Today's story is by user MollyGirl1314. My wife has been peeking at me from around the corners and behind the furniture. It's gone from weird to terrifying. My wife, Lynn, and I have been together for 6 years and married for 11 months. Our entire history together has been very normal, and never once have I noticed any weird behaviors or red flags. I cannot stress enough on how out of character this whole thing is for her. Lynn is very kind, intelligent, and thoughtful. She has always been the no-nonsense type of person. Being childish or trying to scare me is not something she'd normally do. She doesn't even like watching horror movies. When we first started dating, she agreed to watch The Shining with me because she knew how much I loved horror. She was so scared that she didn't even make it through half the movie before we had to turn it off. She isn't into anything creepy and has never been into pranks. It's just not her cup of tea, and that's fine. But that's what's so strange about this. It's so unlike her. I should also add that she never had any mental issues, and as far as I'm aware, it doesn't run in her family. I know some people are able to hide their mental health problems, but in the 6 years we've been together, I think I would have seen some sort of sign. 2 months ago, I was in the kitchen, making some coffee before work. I was running a bit late that morning, and I knew I wouldn't be able to make it to Dunkin' Donuts for my usual morning fix. I took a sip of my coffee, and I hurried down the hall towards the front door. And I happened to notice Lynn peeking at me from around the corner, ahead of me. I could only see her eyes, and a strand of her long, dark hair just hanging past the wall. The rest of her body was concealed behind the corner. I nearly spilled my coffee when I saw her. It did burn the shit out of my lips. "Geez, Lynn," I said, wiping the few drops of coffee off my pants. "You scared the absolute shit out of me." She immediately popped out of view like a little kid that had been caught. I heard her scurry towards the living room, and by the time I got to the front door, she was out of sight. It was really weird, and totally out of character for her, like I said. But I also found it kind of funny that she was being more playful and less serious. I shouted that I loved her and called her a weirdo as I shut the door behind me, and I heard her laughing. Her behavior was a bit odd, but it certainly wasn't something to call a priest over. I had forgotten about it by lunch, and by the time I got home, she was her normal self. I didn't bring it up, and neither did she. And life went on. The next incident happened 3 days later. It was around 2 a.m. and I had woken up to get a drink. I was standing at the kitchen island, jug of OJ in hand, and I felt a strong feeling that I was being watched. For whatever reason, I looked down at the floor, and I saw my wife's smiling face staring back. She was peeking at me from the other side of the island, staring up at me with wide, unblinking eyes and grinning like the Cheshire Cat. I screamed, I'll admit, not out of irritation, but out of fear. For some reason, at that moment, I was scared. At the sound of my scream, Lynn scuttled backwards out of my view, her hands and feet smacking the tile of the floor as she hurried out of the kitchen on all fours. I didn't run after her, or even yell after her. I just stood there, frozen and in shock, wondering what the fuck had possessed her like that. It took me a little longer than I'd like to admit to go back upstairs, but I eventually did. When I got to our bedroom, Lynn was lying on her side, asleep, or at least pretending to be. I stood there for a while watching her breathing to be sure that she was really asleep. I had the feeling that she might jump out at me at any moment I got gotten into bed. But she didn't. I climbed into bed, and she didn't even move. Her breathing was soft and deep, and I was starting to wonder if I had dreamt the whole thing. The next morning, I waited for her to come down for coffee, and after handing her a mug and kissing her on the cheek, I decided to ask her about it. "What was that about last night?" I asked, keeping my tone light and that I didn't offend or embarrass her. She frowned over her cup of coffee, shaking her head like she had no clue what I was referring to. "You were peeking at me again, from over there," I said, pointing to the spot on the kitchen floor by the island. She followed my gaze, and then she looked back at me and burst out laughing. She laughed so hard, but I couldn't help but join her. "You creep me the fuck out sometimes, you know that?" I said, and she giggled and set her coffee on the counter and wrapped her arms around my neck. "You creep me out all the time, so I guess we're even," she teased. We said our goodbyes and left for work. As I drove, I kept thinking about how creepy it had been seeing her grinning at me from behind the island like that. The sounds of her hands made on the floor as she crawled away. I told myself she was just trying to be silly. She's just trying to join me in my love for things horror. It's not like I was afraid of her, but it just didn't sit right with me. I started seeing her peeking at me more and more. Sometimes she'd be peeking out from behind the couch, or the living room curtains. Once she even managed to get inside her grandmother's old trunk that sits at the foot of our bed. I might not even known that she was in there, had not the old hinges given her away. She had the lid propped up, just enough so that only half her face peeked through. She'd be grinning like an excited toddler. It was unnerving. I didn't even know what to say to her. All I could do was stare. And when I finally found my voice, I asked her why on earth she was doing this. She didn't answer, but she slowly closed the lid, shutting herself inside the trunk. I just walked away, feeling disturbed. I didn't understand why she was doing it, but it clearly made her happy. I just hope she would tire of the game quickly. Lynn didn't pick at me for the next 2 weeks. I started to think she was done with her weird little prank, and I was relieved. We were watching a show on Netflix one night, and I had jokingly said that I hadn't seen her peeking at me lately, and that she must have given up on her little spy game. She looked at me with a small smile and said, "Maybe I've just gotten better at it." I didn't say anything, but I wondered whether or not she was joking. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. Was she still peeking at me when I wasn't looking? And had I just not noticed? And if so, what the hell was she getting out of this? I started to feel paranoid, constantly checking whether she was watching from around the corner or behind the door. I was jumpy whenever I was home, and she wasn't in full view of me. I felt stupid and a little crazy. But after a few weeks without another incident, I began to relax. I stopped checking behind the furniture and the walls, and I told myself that this was just a bad memory. And then, a few days ago, things got much worse. Lynn left to go to a friend's, and I lounged on the couch and played a couple games on my laptop. Around 9 p.m., I hopped into the shower, and I was washing the soap from my hair. I felt that awful feeling that I was being watched. I slowly opened my eyes, and I almost had a fucking heart attack. Lynn was peeking from behind the shower again. Her entire head stretched into the shower, just leaving her body outside. Her long, dark hair hung inside the curtain, the ends dripping with water. Her mouth hung open with a terrible grin, eyes wide and red, as if she hadn't been blinking in a while. I screamed and jumped back against the wall. She didn't move, nor her smile waver. Her makeup ran down her cheeks into black streaks. She looked giddy and completely deranged. I was fucking terrified. We stood like that for a few moments, neither of us saying a word. Finally, after what felt like forever, she slowly pulled her head back out of the shower. I watched her blurry figure through the curtain as she moved backwards toward the bathroom door. A second later, the bathroom door slammed shut, hard enough to rattle the mirror. I screamed again and jumped out of the shower to lock the door. I stayed inside the bathroom for over an hour. Maybe I overreacted to some of you. But joke or not, I wasn't going to put up with this crazy shit anymore. That's what I kept telling myself as I paced the bathroom, stopping to listen at the door every few minutes. Suddenly I heard a muffled sound, and I pressed my ear against the bathroom door, straining to listen. I couldn't hear anything, but I envisioned standing on the other side of the door, giggling at her joke. I felt a surge of anger. I was beyond pissed, made to feel scared in my own house, and made to hide in the bathroom for an hour. And all for what? Some joke? If it was a joke, it was an awful one. What the fuck, Lynn? I snapped. This shit is getting really fucking annoying. I waited for her to apologize, or to call me a jerk. But instead, I heard a faint moan. So quiet, I wonder if I had heard it at all. And then complete silence. Lynn? I called out. Not able to even hide the shakiness in my voice, I got no response. Just my own heavy breathing. I swear to God, just fucking stop it, I yelled, pounding my fist on the door. I waited for her to cuss me out, something I would expect from me talking to her like that. I never screamed at her before, but there was nothing. Just the occasional drip from the shower head. I won't deny that I was scared, too afraid to open the door to face my own wife. I waited another 30 minutes or so, which feels like a fucking lifetime when you're scared. Finally, I decided I wasn't going to spend the night hiding in my bathroom, so I got down on my knees and peered under the door. I almost expected to see her face peeking back at me, but thankfully, I didn't. I could see straight down the hallway, to the top of the stairs, but no Lynn. I didn't know if I should be happy about that or not. I looked for a few minutes, waiting to see her pop up over the top step, but it never came. I stood up, my hand hovering over the door, and mentally prepared myself to open it. I slowly turned the lock with shaky fingers, about to yank it open, when I heard a sound that still makes me nauseous when I think about it. A moan, louder than before, but this time I was able to tell just where it came from. I had turned my head to the closet door as if in slow motion. I locked eyes with my wife, who was peeking out at me from the slight gap. Her eyes still wide as ever, and her mouth was hanging open from the most grotesque gaping smile I'd ever seen. I didn't even scream. I was too scared for that. Her hands clasped at her chest, body trembling with sheer delight, as if she could barely contain her excitement. A short, graspy moan bubbled up from her throat, deep and raw, sending a shiver through my entire body. Somehow I found the ability to pull the bathroom door open, and I ran as fast as I could all the way down the steps, snagging my keys and my phone from the table in the living room before running outside to my car. All I could hear is her shrill of laughter behind me, but I didn't hear her get any closer. I didn't bother shutting the front door. I drove away from the house faster than I legally should have, shivering the entire time. Maybe it was the fear, maybe it was the cold, or maybe a little of both. I hadn't grabbed a coat or even a pair of shoes. I was still in my boxers, and my hair was still damp. I drove straight to my brother Chris's house about 40 minutes away, ignoring any call or text that I got. I didn't check my phone until I was safely parked at my brother's driveway. Lynn had called 4 times and sent a flurry of texts. All were wondering why I had gone and left like that. I threw my phone at the dash in rage, furious at her nonchalant attitude. My brother and his wife were surprised to see me, especially dressed in a pair of boxers, and told me to stay as long as I needed. Chris lent me some clothes and asked me what happened. I told him that Lynn and I had a fight, but didn't get into details. I didn't want him to think that I was overreacting, leaving my wife over a prank. Even if it was a strange one. I mean, hadn't I encouraged her for years to lighten up instead of being so serious all the time? I had wanted her to relax and loosen up, but this was definitely not what I had in mind. I tried to sleep on their sofa, but my brain wouldn't let me sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lynn's face staring at me from the inside of the closet. Knowing that she had been in there waiting for me the entire time made my skin crawl. She'd never left me in that fucking bathroom at all. Instead, she slipped in the closet and slammed the bathroom door shut to fool me. The mere thought of going back home gave me anxiety. I tossed and I turned, unable to sleep. Chris ended up giving me a sleeping pill, so I was able to get a little rest. My sleep was filled of terrible dreams, all of Lynn's smiling face. I woke up as the sun started to rise. My sore body ached from the sofa. I felt drained. I knew I'd have to call Lynn at some point, but I didn't know what to say to her. I wouldn't be going home unless she gave me her word she'd never do any of that creepy shit anymore. I just wanted my wife back. Her normal, serious self never looked so good to me. I was contemplating calling her and telling her that. A familiar feeling came over me. I was being watched. I was staring at the ceiling, heart in my throat. I didn't want to look away, but the longer I ignored the feeling, the worse it got. My eyes drifted away from the ceiling, almost on their own. Her face was pressed up against the window beside the couch, staring down at me with that same gaping smile. Drool dribbled down her lips, leaving 2 long streaks down the glass. I didn't know how long she'd been there, but something told me that she's been there for quite a while. Possibly all night. Boo! Well, how do we feel about that one, everybody? If you want more, please leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe even. Tell me how badly you want part 2. But as always, thank you for joining me on another sleepless night. I'm your host, the Radio Demon. Good night.